we have how NFTs can help climate change. As a geoscientist, I can't wait to hear all about this. We have Fogel, Clay Robbins, Eliza Fish, and Brady is stepping in for somebody, I believe. Come on in.
Come on up.
Come on down. You can make the crowd kind of try to figure it out.
Keep them guessing.
Guess.
I look nothing like me, so yeah, for better or worse. Well, hey there, everyone. My name's Clay Robbins. I am a principal at Slow Ventures. We are a generalized seed fund where I spend all of my time day in and day out in the early stage crypto ecosystem. And the reason why I'm on this panel is we have a strong thesis around the intersection of climate and crypto. And how crypto native rails, the hot ball of money that's rolling around the ecosystem, can actually be put towards some good in terms of helping to offset some of the negative behaviors in the context of climate change. So, but these panelists are actually out here in the ecosystem doing the hard work to actually help drive that change. And so I'm really excited to have them introduce themselves and give a little bit of an introduction to their place in the ecosystem and how their particular projects are helping push towards mitigating the effects of climate change. So, Eliza, you want to start?
Yeah, thanks, Clay. Thank you for moderating, stepping up for us. My name is Eliza Fish. I am the Director of Partnerships and Creator Relations at Voice. You can check us out on voice.com. We are a carbon neutral NFT platform, so really focused on the digital marketplace for emerging artists. You can buy, mint, sell, export NFTs from Voice to other chains. And right now we're focused on onboarding as many artists into Web3, really doing it from a place of care and support through our residency programs.
Hey everyone, I'm Phil from Flow Carbon. Flow Carbon is doing a couple things in the voluntary carbon market. We're first tokenizing carbon credits, so we're creating a protocol that will allow anyone who has off-chain carbon credits to bring those carbon credits on-chain and trade them with full transparency, liquidity, and automatic price discovery. We're also helping to create financing for carbon projects to be much more efficient and allowing that capital to come from on-chain sources and go directly to projects. We're also involved in a couple different NFT things that we're trying to do as demand drivers for carbon credits.
Hey everyone, my name is Brady Gentile. I'm a Director of Marketing for Ecosystems on Hedera. And Hedera is a layer 1 public distributed ledger. We're carbon negative, enabled by our underlying consensus mechanism called Hashgraph, which is incredibly efficient. As part of the Hedera ecosystem, and the reason that I'm speaking today is we have a number of ESG-related tokenization applications on Hedera for carbon offsets. And Hedera, through a report done by UCL Center for Blockchain Research, was listed as having the lowest average emission rate per transaction across a number of different layer 1 networks, as well as layer 2 networks, and even in comparison to the Visa network.
Awesome. Well, so I think a good place to start is just super high level in the context of NFTs, NFT issuance, NFT trading. You know, everything in the context of blockchain-based systems is that things like proof of work are inherently bad for the environment. And so if we could start, one of you can take this, is, you know, are NFTs actually bad for the environment? And if so, why? If not, what are some of the myths out there, and how do you address those when asked?
I'll start there. I think that there is a little bit of a myth that NFTs are bad for the environment as a blanket statement. It depends, first of all, on which chain you're operating, right? If you're operating on a proof of work chain, it obviously has, the entire chain has a larger footprint than, say, a proof of stake chain, or say operating on Hashgraph, which does have an incredibly low footprint, or also on Polygon, which has an incredibly low footprint. But at the same time, there's a very interesting conversation that people are having about who has the responsibility for the on-chain footprint for a network like Ethereum, right? Is the responsibility, does that lie with the miners, or does it lie with the protocols and the people who are actually using the network? And at the end of the day, it's a very interesting conversation and very like philosophical conversation, but the truth is it's everyone's responsibility. So if you are minting an NFT project on Ethereum, there is some amount of footprint that you are creating or you are responsible for or you are participating in, and it would be nice to see everyone who is participating in that ecosystem take some responsibility and offset a piece of that, what their activity is.
Anything else to add, guys?
I'd agree with that. I think in addition to that, too, you can, the functionality of NFTs, you can use them for ESG-related activities. So, you can mint an NFT that is representative of a carbon offset, and you can trade that between companies who are trying to purchase carbon offsets to mitigate their impact on the climate. You can even have to the degree of individuals that want to offset their own carbon footprint. It sort of democratizes access to the ability to offset our emissions by having it be on the blockchain.
I think that this panel actually represents something that's really important in this space, which is that there are so many different ways that we can build. And we're very smart, and technology is very smart. And I really encourage all of you to explore and also try to build alternative systems. One of the things that we're working on at Voice, so we're actually built on a private blockchain, and that has enabled us to mitigate our carbon footprint. And now we're building bridges to other blockchains. So this week we launched Polygon, so you can mint a carbon neutral NFT on voice.com, and then you can send it to another chain of your choice. And that's just one way to go about it. And I think that the work that both of you are doing also represents these other solutions.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue to sort of artist enablement and what is sort of the set of tools in their toolkit that they should think about in terms of at Mint, how do I do something that, run a Mint that is either carbon neutral through something like a private blockchain, or are there other tools out there that they can leverage to help drive offset or even carbon capture?
So at least on the Hedera side, we're an EVM compatible chain. You theoretically could use smart contracts to mint ERC compatible tokens, but Hedera offers a native network service called the Hedera Token Service, and that utilizes Hashgraph consensus for high throughput, low fees, but most importantly, and relevant to this panel, a very low carbon footprint. And so through that innovation and through us promoting that architecture of building and minting tokens, we're sort of able to pivot the way that people are architecting, but still being able to ensure that they're able to be carbon negative.
So one of the reasons why we believe it's so important for carbon credits to come on chain in a tokenized form is so that they can become a primitive, a building block that can be used by creators and by consumers and by users to actually help reduce their footprint. So let's think about it. In a world without tokenized carbon credits, if you were a creator and you did an NFT drop and you said, okay, I want to donate or I want to give 10% of the proceeds of my mint to basically buy and retiring carbon credits, you'd have to take that money off-chain, go and convert it into fiat, go contact a broker, tell the broker that this is how many carbon credits you want to buy. You get retail pricing because you're probably not buying more than 50,000 carbon credits, so now you're going to be paying twice as much or 50% more than the actual price of the carbon credit. The entire transaction is going to take weeks to months before it's actually finalized, and at the end of the day, what you're getting is they'll send you a PDF saying, okay, I retired these carbon credits in your name at the registry, and probably because it was such a small volume, you wouldn't actually be able to go into the public registry to see that that was true. You have to trust the PDF that they gave you. And now you go back to your community and you say, hey, community, I got this PDF, right? How excited are you for this, right? Instead, with tokenized carbon, you can actually build it into either the platforms themselves or into the token contracts themselves so that these things automatically happen. And so you can have royalties, portions of royalties, always going to buying carbon credits and retiring them immediately. And this will lead to a scenario where artists can basically say, I'm creating a systemic good for the planet, and it has an ongoing long tail effect.
And then to that point too, for the first section of what you described, like how much carbon is being emitted just from all of those processes and those people on their way to work and the intermediaries that exist, I feel like that in itself, like if you compared that to using a blockchain and automating all of that, it's probably worse for the environment. Yeah.
I guess in terms of artist education and what people are actually buying to drive offset, you know, it's somewhat of a black box in terms of you go and you search for different types of carbon credits, you get a million different results on Google. And so, you know, what can projects like your guys' do in the context of education and positioning of these purchases as really doing the thing that they say they do, the PDF that's issued, you know, maybe appended to metadata on chain or something like that, it is actually what it says it is. Or maybe better said, you know, how do you solve the Oracle problem of the thing that's happening on chain in the out in the off-chain world is actually the thing that it says it's doing?
Well, so the really cool part about a carbon credit is it's a digitally native asset to begin with. It is an intangible asset. It only exists as a database entry. So right now, they just exist in SQL databases. So ultimately, the long-term goal is to have the people who issue carbon credits, these large NGOs, and as well as all of the new tech platforms that are coming up to start issuing credits in a new fashion, is to have all of the data that basically drives the issuance of a carbon credit stored on chain, verified and validated on chain, and then a carbon credit is issued on chain. All of the data is stored on chain, the asset is stored on chain, and it's digitally native to begin with. So you don't need an oracle, right? Right now, what Flow Carbon is doing is building a stopgap measure where we're bringing off-chain carbon credits on chain. And in order to do that, we have to basically act as a custodian with very complicated legal structuring to make sure that everything we do is that we say we do, that there's audits and there's real-time audits, and we're building chain-link oracles to try and do it, but it's a single source of truth, so it's not really that robust on a day-to-day basis. And so you have to then overlay that with accounting firms that come in and do actual audits and certify it. It's incredibly complicated where it can be very simple because these are database entries to begin with. And so the other thing that we're trying to do is to build standardization so that when a consumer, whether that be a large corporate or an individual user, an artist, anyone, wants to buy a carbon credit, they don't have to think too much about it. They basically can pick from a set of different styles of carbon credit, different, like basically varieties of carbon credits that exist for like reforestation, afforestation, blue carbon, which is planting like mangrove trees in the ocean, right? All sorts of different kinds of carbon. They can pick sort of the standard, and then they just have to use that without knowing it. The analogy that I like to use for what it's like to buy a carbon credit today is imagine you wanted to buy some cereal, and you didn't know anything about all the different kinds of cereal, and you walk into a supermarket, and there are dozens and dozens of different boxes of cereal on the shelf, each one at a totally different price point. And then you go to another supermarket, and all of those different cereal boxes plus some new ones are there, all at totally different price points. And then a third supermarket, and on and on. That's what buying carbon credits is like today. You have to go and comparison shop for each individual box of cereal and then decide, oh, do I actually want Honey Nut Cheerios or do I want Frosted Flakes? And where do I find the cheapest price for that?
No, it's too much. What you're talking about is accessibility, right? Yeah, you have to speak so quickly to get all of that out, right? Like, this is about accessibility, and this is about making it as easy for the consumer, for the artist in our case, as possible. So providing standardization, and then also what we're finding is that we're kind of concierging it for everyone, from collectors to curators to artists. We are kind of brokering those relationships with with environmental organizations to ensure that these NFTs are carbon neutral and that they're backed by specific programs like reforestation, carbon offsets, et cetera. But I think that we really are at a point where that still has to happen. It still has to, it's our responsibility, it's the platform responsibility to help support the consumer.
And just to make the tooling more easy, right? We don't want it to be so difficult for an artist to go out and figure out how to make their NFT carbon neutral or carbon negative, right? It should be, if you want to do something good for the planet and you're a creator, we should make it super, super easy for you to come and say, here's my artwork that I want to sell to the world. And it doesn't have to just be artwork. It can be anything, right? NFTs are not limited to pictures.
I'm biased.
But yeah.
I think that extends back also to the developers who are talking about standardization. And I know like we're talking with Flow Carbon about potentially building on Hedera. And one of the things that from a developer perspective we do to try to create standards across the entire carbon tokenization offset ecosystem is have an open source tool called Guardian. And Guardian allows developers to, it's essentially an underlying engine for carbon credit tokenization in marketplaces. And we built that open source to, it's being utilized by folks like EDF, Electricité de France, an application called Dovu that's on Hedera that's also doing carbon credit tokenization and really trying to ensure that all of this is interoperable across the entirety of the carbon credit tokenization ecosystem, whether it's on Hedera or on another network. Because I think at the end of the day, too, it's like one of the issues is that you hear about like the double spend problem of carbon credits, where they could be issued twice in 2 different certificates by different authorities with the same project, and it's important to ensure that there's standards across the entirety of the ecosystem, and then everyone knows exactly which project has issued which credit. And so that's kind of, I think, part of the developer component of solving that problem.
Well, and this brings up another really good point, which is awareness and education, right? I mean, I think that that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we're all facing in this space, because it takes a lot of resources. And the main resource is time. I can't count how many hours, I am on a phone call trying to actually handhold, right, people to help educate them on the space and how to produce a project that is meaningful for them and that is environmentally sustainable.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about sort of developer education, artist education. How about consumers? Like, will consumers' engagement with this be more explicit or implicit? Or if I'm, trading within the NFT ecosystem or participating in some form outside of those 2 sort of roles, what are different avenues to do so? Or what are things in the future that you think will abstract it away sufficiently for consumers?
I feel like in the long term, at the end of the day, all of this technology is infrastructure. I think historically, infrastructure has never been sexy, especially development infrastructure. Like, no one ever cared what database Instagram used. They just cared that when they click like, that it works for them. And it's interesting to me to see how, even in marketing, like the forward, putting the blockchain forward above sort of the application and what it's supposed to do and the value is interesting. So I think on the long enough timeline, this technology is going to be obfuscated. It's not going to be about what blockchain it's built on. It's going to be, does the application add value? Is it lower cost for me to accomplish a goal? Is it faster, and can I move my assets around? But on the front end, it just looks like your bank application.
Yeah, and I think to talk about who is doing the offsetting and how you educate people. There's a lot of education curve in all of this. Carbon credits are actually an incredibly complicated market, an incredibly complicated vehicle, and we're working really hard to try and make that simpler for consumers. But at the end of the day, we want people to be able to interact with things that are high impact and do things that are high impact without a lot of friction. So whether that's a consumer who's like, I want to do something with my dollars that's going to have an impact on the planet, and you're like, great, no problem, go and buy and retire a carbon credit, and that is real impact that can actually be measured, and we can record the impact. Or if it's actually obfuscating it. So you have an artist who says, I want to have an impact, and I want to have an impact on a larger scale, and so I'm going to do an NFT drop that is basically entirely built on a platform that causes the whole min price or some large portion of the min price to be offset. So we're working on a protocol that actually allows artists to do something very similar to that creates a very cool concept where the NFTs themselves are actually auctioned off for carbon tokens, right? And those carbon tokens are then retired immediately, right? And then there are additional mints that can happen afterwards at an increasing min price. And if they're traded, and if those NFTs get traded, a portion of the royalties are always going to burning offset. So an artist who says, I want to do something for the planet, I want to basically donate my art or use my art for good, can have a really easy toolkit where they can just upload their art and put this out there, and the people who are interacting with it are not necessarily interacting with it because they want to do good for the planet. It's just happening in the background. They want to buy the NFT. From their standpoint, they are still going online, saying, I want to bid on that, I want to mint it, it's going to cost me X amount of dollars, right? That's how they're thinking about it, even though it's paid for in carbon credits, right? And so now it's really easy for them to actually just do this, and the impact is sort of happening without their actually saying, oh, I want to have an impact.
That's the dream, right? That's the dream that we were talking about earlier, that where you don't even know that it's happening, right? It's just you are producing a product, you are dropping an NFT collection of a digital art body of work, and you don't even know that you're also making a huge environmental impact towards sustainability.
And we can get protocols to actually build this directly into their protocol. So for example, Celo and Hedera, I believe, both do this. I believe Hedera does as well, where it's actually built into the consensus mechanism that some of the inflationary tokens that are issued go directly to offsetting carbon credits, right? So it's built in. So in theory, as the value of those layer 1 protocols increase over time, more is offset, even though the energy consumption is not increasing, because that's the way those systems are set up. They're set up to be carbon negative application layers or carbon negative layer 1 protocols. And you can do that at layer 2. You can do that at the application layer as well. So you can build into, if you are Uniswap, for example, you can say, great, we're going to take 0.0001% of every transaction fee and buy a carbon credit and retire it immediately.
And that is happening actually right now. There's an application called Suku. They do a number of different projects. One of them is NFTs, another one is around supply chain. But for their supply chain partners that are using Suku, they offer the ability to immediately calculate and offset any sort of emissions that they have as part of the supply chain process. Yeah.
And so, other than the existing you just mentioned one, Brady, but other than your projects that you're working on directly, when you look out across the ecosystem, like what are things that you see being done that keep you excited and you admire from afar if it's not directly something that you're working on?
So I actually think tokenization of carbon credits is incredibly low-hanging fruit, and it's sort of something that has to be done to move everything else forward in the space and make a lot of things easier that we're talking about. But what the really exciting hard work that's being done is to actually figure out how to make the creation of carbon credits more transparent, more automated, and more data-driven, so that this is not something that has a bottleneck. Right now, there's a massive bottleneck in the form of these NGOs that issue carbon credits. And the reason why it's a bottleneck is these are very small NGOs. What they are issuing is very complicated, and they're validating manual data. They're literally looking through Excel sheets. They're looking through things that were given to them that were people recorded with tape measures. They wrote down on clipboards in forests. All of the people who are building out these, like Open Forest Protocol and Regen, these are protocols that are really doing very, very hard work to figure out how to automate the process of carbon credit creation.
One project that comes to mind that we were talking about earlier is ecosapiens.xyz. Highly recommend checking it out. I think it's one of the, it's a new project, but certainly one that I think kind of encompasses everything that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, just to put a finer point on that one, the ecosapiens is launching a collection where it essentially takes the speculative behavior that's occurring on NFTs today, so the initial mint, right, and then the royalties from secondary sales, and those go to purchase off-chain carbon credits. And the unique thing that kind of brings it home to the consumer is that when you go out and purchase the carbon credits, the metadata for the NFT is actually appended with each of those purchases and the actual offset. And the asset itself updates and evolves as more carbon is sequestered through speculation or resale around the individual item. So it's, it kind of ties it together for users around a behavior that people are already doing anyway, so it might as well go to do some good. In the closing minute here, would love to get final thoughts from everyone here and maybe leave us with something that keeps you optimistic or things that folks in the audience should take away, whether they're artists, creators, developers, in the context of climate and NFTs.
Yeah, I think that I charge all of you in this room and everyone in this panel to continue to work towards environmental sustainability in everything that you're doing. I think that it would be very cool if we all joined forces and made a commitment to protecting the environment and putting actual metrics against that, so we have something to work towards, maybe something that looks like the Paris Agreement, because we can do it.
Yeah, I'll second that. I think that if there's, we're building infrastructure and tools, and so if there are additional tools and infrastructure that can make it easier for you to have an impact, please let us know how we can build those for you.
Yeah, thirding it. Sometimes regulation takes a really long time to catch up, and at the end of the day, it is really up to everybody to figure out the best path forward and be conscious of climate change.
Great. Great place to end it. Turn it back over to
Awesome.
you.
Thank you so much. Let's get a big hand.